Hello and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Today we are joined by award-winning winning I'm having a lot of typos now. Columnist, author, and publisher Robert Gaines. Welcome, Robert.
I want to make it clear I'm not a communist. I'm a columnist. Just so we know.
You know, if I didn't I don't know. Sometimes when I speak, my
Yeah.
tongue I get twisted, and then I'll have to like repeat it to myself. Even before I do these, I actually practice in here in the sound booth before I bring you on. So
Well,
that's just
that's the great thing about writing is because you can go over your mistakes and nobody knows.
right. In this
Right.
kind of format, you're like, well, it's out there now.
You said it.
That's all right. I usually try to correct and,
Yeah, that's a
you
good
know,
idea. Oh,
yeah.
sure.
All right. Um, so Uh, let me first say that in your bio, you traveled quite a bit growing up in a naval family.
That's right.
Okay, so you went from California, Rhode Island, Virginia. What I'm most curious about, and this actually took me a little bit because you didn't give me it in your bio, so I had to
Oh,
look a little bit for it.
okay.
What I'm most curious about is how did you go from Pennsylvania to McCall, Idaho?
Oh, well, I went by way of Virginia. How's that sound?
Mm.
When my career was at Bucknell University, and when I retired early from Bucknell to be a writer,
Hmm.
you know how that goes. My son and daughter were down in Virginia, and so I went down there to be close to them. And then about 4 years ago, my sister's husband had been, an all-American Boy Scout, and he was up in his 80s, and unfortunately began a process of needing help and hospitalization,
Oh,
and so I went out there at a time that he was having problems, and of course, being with my older sister, she started taking care of me. So
oh.
I just loved Idaho. I mean, the air, it's in a mountain town, small mountain town, and it was just like, oh, so different than the East. And
Nice.
unfortunately, the bad thing was then of course the pandemic hits, and my kids are back east, and my grandkids are back east, and I'm in the mountains, which is
Well, actually, you're the second interview that I've had from Idaho.
oh, okay.
Yes, so another gentleman I had on the show was from Idaho. And just in full disclosure, I have a brother-in-law that lives in Idaho and my mother-in-law and her husband
Oh,
live in Idaho.
oh, well, it's a beautiful. I mean, it's just a beautiful state, and also spent a lot of time in Oregon and Washington, and now right now I'm speaking to you from North Carolina. So there,
Oh, you're just all over the
I
place.
am. I am. Uh,
Well, you've had an extensive career as a sports columnist. And let's see, this was at the time at the Bucknell University. Am I pronouncing that right?
Bucknell, yes, it's in
Bucknell?
central Pennsylvania.
Okay. Tell me the full extent of how that came about, being a columnist.
Well, it's not easy going from being a sports writer to the director of communications at a university.
Hmm.
Believe me, but I got the job, so I was really excited, and we left with our my wife and I and our daughter had left San Diego with earthquakes and all that stuff. We thought we would find a better life back east. I don't know that we did, but things worked out and it was great. I loved working at Bucknell. I worked there for 15 years, and but my experience as a writer was really capped in, as a columnist in San Diego. But then
Right.
I worked a time with Williamsport Sun Gazette where I went from a big newspaper to sort of a medium newspaper, and I was doing, oh my gosh, I was doing editing and writing and the whole gambit of what it takes in the journalism business. And I just always wanted to write. I have a whole back history of writing. My my grandfather, who I never knew, was the editor of the Kansas City Star way back when Ernest Hemingway was there, and had cousins that were sports writers and such, and so I
Mhm.
always wanted to be a writer. And even when I was in junior high school, I was thinking someday I'm going to be a writer, and I realized, it's just doing it. It's just doing it. It's
Right.
going to college can help, I guess, can help sort of slow you down, maybe, but eventually you'll get there.
Right. Well, I did a little college myself. I just had a couple semesters, but I ended up having to quit for other reasons.
Oh.
But this isn't about me. This is
Well,
about you.
yeah. No, I almost seriously, I joined a fraternity, at San Diego State. I almost flunked out my first semester, but then
Really?
I came to the realization that either I study or tell my father I flunked out. I figured it'd be a lot
Oh,
easier to study.
yeah.
I wasn't going to dare face him.
I think the thing is when you start college, I mean, now me, I was a lot older. I already had a kid and I was
Oh,
married.
yeah.
So I did an online kind of thing for a couple
Uh-huh.
of semesters. But I think when you're young and you start college, I think it's freedom and we kind of get carried away a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And because like my sister, when she went to college, or you end up getting so involved in the partier side or the freedom side
Right.
that you forget about the studies. So I can
Well,
see.
yeah. I
I
had
think
no
it's
idea. I had no idea why I was there. I just I'm done with high school, so I go to college. And looking back, I would have done it a lot different. Believe me.
yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Um, so let's tell me about how a columnist turns to writing classic literature. I mean, that has to be the most distance in format. Yes.
Yes, especially sports writing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, my mind has never been one to slow down, and so I've always had, people say you're so aloof. I'm just thinking. I'm not aloof at all. I'm just thinking, and
You
things go.
actually, when I was doing some research on you, not to interrupt, but
Oh, that's
as
all
I
right.
was doing, you really are aloof. Was like really digging for stuff on you.
Well, just call the FBI. They probably have something. Yeah. So no, no, it's just that I've always wanted to be a writer, and I loved writing for sports and having my own ability to write for whatever I wanted or whoever I wanted to talk with was great, but it helped form me, and.
Mhm.
But I had these ideas, and I still do. And I wrote my first book actually when I was in my 20s. Never published it. It was called The Man with Total Control, and it was really out there. It was really weird. I loved reading Kafka and Kurt Vonnegut and sort of different kind of different kind of writing, sort of more of absurdist fiction.
Mhm.
And I love that. Of course, I love all kinds of reading and genres, but um, I've written books about my dogs from the '70s. I've written, yeah. I have things go. I've got about 9 books in my head that I wish I had enough time to just really get into,
Right.
but I'm too busy doing other things. And that's sort of what happened with this writing. Is I really started writing when my first son or my second child was born, and it was just something that I was going through a thing at the time. I wanted to be a writer, but I was off on another career at Bucknell. Actually, I hadn't started at Bucknell yet, but I was still writing newspapers. And I just felt that I was never going to meet my potential. And it reminded me of back when I was in my 20s, when I didn't even know if I was ever going to have a job. You're young. Will I be married? Will I have kids? Will I have a career?
Right.
Will I ever, find my
Oh,
path
did we?
and be
There you
successful?
are.
And so I really thought I had the tools and the talents, and that's what I based my main character on is a man who has all the talent, a piano player, a former baseball player when he was in college in the 1920, who had this great potential, was from a very famous family, who the father was a great pianist and the brother was a weird, strange writer, and the sister was a avant-garde artist, and their lives, they became very famous, and they were the famous members of his family. And he was better than them at everything they did, but he never tried. And so now that he's approaching 100 years, it's like it's not it's over, you know, as far as him ever finding himself. And the chance is that a friend of his who knows about all of his writings and wants to edit them gets a young filmographer, and she's 28 years old and just happens to look like a wife his only wife he had in his life many years ago, and that was a very tragic story. And he just is old and just loses it and becomes invigorated with his dreams and being able to talk to her while she's doing a film of him, his life, as a sort of a celebration for his 100th uh, anniversary year, 100th year on Earth.
Now, just so our listeners know, you're talking about The Brave Historian, correct?
I think so.
Okay. Because I asked you how you got from a columnist to writing classical.
Oh,
and
that
that's
was
fine.
lucky.
No, that's fine, because we were going to get there anyways. It's okay.
Okay, yeah, no, we were.
It's just a little sooner than I've got it all scripted out here, but I just want to make sure that we're letting the audience know which book we're speaking about.
Yeah, The Brave Historian. And it's sort of funny because I was thinking about this the other day. I started really writing this in terms of a 100-year-old man when I was not even yet 50. And so it's amazing how accurate I've been in figuring things out.
When you wrote this at 50, is this because this was a turn for you? Because I know as we get older, like our first is when we first hit 30s and we're like, oh crap, we're out of our 20s. And then 40s is another
40's horrible
milestone. Yeah. So when you were reaching your 50, was this a milestone for you? You kind of felt your own age, why you wanted to reach even farther in a man's age to write this?
Well, no, what I do is I've always walked. I just walk. I go for walks, hikes, and I always take a notebook with me. I mean, this is long before that. So I write down ideas for when I was writing sports, for just ideas for columns or whatnot, or, just ideas. And I've always done that. And it struck me one day about an idea, which really at the beginning of this, it was nothing like the ending. I mean, what I started with was something totally different. My idea originally was just a 100-year-old man who realizes he's so gifted and yet he's been a failure, a brilliant idiot, kind of thing.
Now you're talking about my life.
No, yeah. I was figured there was people who would relate to that, but that was mine too, and I was still thinking that, in those terms, and how that would be. But the things just came together, and what was really weird is I wrote this over the years. Of course, again, I'm working at the university. I'm doing all these things. I've got a wife and children growing up, and you get involved in all these things, and so it took a long time I just kept polishing this book, and I'd throw it away. I said, oh, it's just like John Hammond, who's the protagonist of the story. It's not going to work. And then I'd read it and say, oh my gosh, this is brilliant, and then I'd throw it away, and then I'd read it again a couple of years later, kind of thing, and I said, oh my gosh, this is too good. And I just said, I've got to write this thing, and I stayed with it. But the I guess the thing about it is the characters got in my head, and I think this is true with all writing, and they started telling me what to do. I mean, literally, they would tell me how to write them and how to change, their personalities. And of course, the girl, Shelley, in this story, she looks at it as a thing. She does not want to. She loves John Hammond, what he's done and who he is. But she doesn't want to end up like him. She wants to win, a film career where she wins an Academy Award. And she doesn't want to. His biggest mistake was he never pushed. He never took his talent and pushed it because he felt his brother already had the writing thing down, his sister already had the art thing down, and his father had the music thing down. And that's how many people have not reached their potential simply because of that. And
Right.
that was the basis of the story. And then I came across a situation where I had gone to this is going to change course here real quick,
Okay.
but but I
Thanks for
had
letting
gone
me know.
just so we know, leaving the brave historian. But I had gone from California in the ninth grade
Hmm.
to Norfolk, Virginia, Norview High School. And this was a time the schools had just reopened, within the last 8 months from integration, from segregation to integration. And Norview had 8 black students. Well, I came from California where that was no big deal, but in
Right.
Norfolk, Virginia in 1960, it was a big deal. I mean, it was crazy. It was awful the way these kids were treated.
Hmm.
And what was really crazy was the way I thought the majority of Virginians were racist. And what I didn't realize is that we were all just scared, a lot of us. And there were a lot of racists, and it was sort of a bad situation. But my point is that one of the kids from this 8 kids, they were called the Norfolk 17, and there were 17 black kids who went to the various schools in Norfolk because essentially the court said, you have to take these kids. But one of these kids became the first black person to play white high school football in the South. This is in
Hmm.
1962. His name was Andrew Heidelberg. And I always remembered him and hearing the stories of him. And I saw what happened, how a place that was so racist took this kid and the thing was nobody's going to block for him. He's going to get killed. Well, it was just the opposite. So
Really?
much change, so much. And still the other kids were going through hell. But anyway, so many years later, I thought Andrew had died, and I'd written about him when Arthur Ashe died. I wrote about him in a column about comparing the two. And then one
Right.
day I was looking at Google, and there he was. And so I called him up and I said, hey, and I went down to see him and I said, hey, I was a year behind him. And I said, I'd like to write a book about you. And he says, let's write a movie. So we did both. And I got a literary agent. We got a contract from Random House. And
Oh.
oh, yeah, great. I was ecstatic. Well, Andrew, having been dumped on his entire life, sort of fought back. And he was a banker, after he'd almost made the Pittsburgh Steelers when he was younger. He made the last cut. So he's a
Hmm.
great athlete, the fastest kid I ever saw in my life. He was so good at football. And so he became a real story. And in fact, the newspapers at first, the Virginian Pilot called him the colored halfback, which is so bizarre nowadays to think about. But the colored halfback and his story that he told me of growing up was phenomenal.
Really?
Anyway, it's a great story. So we got this contract. I'm ready to retire early from Bucknell to be a writer because Random House. And then Andrew jumps in and gets the whole thing canceled because he wants more money and a better deal. And oh my gosh, we're nobody asking for a better deal.
Right.
So then I was out of
So
I
you got
just
so you got real close for a short time, and then it
real
just
close,
kind
yeah.
of, yeah.
But so I put that on hold, and I'd done a book that I self-published on Christy Mathewson, the famous baseball player. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever written, because I
Mhm.
wrote it, I guess. I don't know.
Well,
But
it
it
must
was,
be true if we
yeah,
think it, right?
yeah. And I mean, it got a lot of everybody that read it said, oh, this is fabulous and phenomenal. But I self-published because I was in a hurry, and all the red flags in self-publishing just hit me in the head. I mean, stabbed me through the
Yeah.
heart. Just, marketing and all that stuff. It was disastrous. So then my literary agent said, why did you do this? You should have told me. And so she got me another deal with a major publisher,
Hmm.
and I wrote a book for them, and they put me on their library line,
Oh.
and the book I guess was successful because it sold 400 or 500 copies, and they made money, and they said we'll sell it, and they were selling it for $40, and they said you
Wow.
can buy it for 30. I'm like, how can I buy it for 30 and get people to get signed autographs for 40. It's just
Now
crazy.
you're talking about like nonfiction. So your agent wanted
This
the
was historical fiction.
historical
Yeah,
fiction.
yeah.
Okay.
So I made my mind up. I got to tell you, I'm still getting the royalties, and I guess I probably, with all the work I put for that book, making at least 29 cents an hour now for what I put into it.
Oh,
And
that's
so
nice.
that got me to thinking, there's got to be a better thing. And I met a person who had a lot of money, and we talked about, starting a
Publishing company.
publishing company, which I did. And
Now you're speaking about Hidden Shelf Publishing
Hidden
House.
Shelf Publishing House, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're doing really well. We're not making any money, but we're doing really well. But we're author friendly, and that was the idea.
Well, when we say we're doing really well, for I think the majority of artists, when you are enter something that you enjoy, to us that's the success.
Oh, right.
It might not be the money that you want. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It might
Well,
not
I
be
wear
the
two
money.
hats. I wear two
Yeah,
hats.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Okay, so as you're talking about the publishing company, let's take a moment and talk about the drive to publish fiction through Hidden Shelf Publishing House.
Yeah.
Let's speak about how this venture came about directly. When you're mentioning it, you said you had a partner.
yeah, and he had a lot of money, and he really had a lot going on, and he lasted about a week and a half in doing it, and said, he dropped out. So then I had to scramble, get an investor to help get going. And that's right around the time I moved to Idaho. And so, I got really lucky, I got to tell you, because after, my the woman who is my publisher, I have three main women that work for me, and they're all over the country. But two of them are in Boise, and they're just, I mean, the woman she's amazing. I mean, what she does and how she does it, and she's really good. I'm so fortunate to have found her. And then I found another person who had not done any of this stuff yet, but in reading her resume, she looked like the person who had a great future. And boy, I was surprised 10 times over. And the third person is actually my daughter, who you should never hire. But she has always been a great artist, and she has put her art into our covers. She did the Brave Historian cover, which you saw, and then the graphic design was done by Kristen, who is the publisher I was telling you about. Unfortunately, none of these women, all in their 30s, and so you can imagine how powerful they are in their ideas, and they have good ideas. But none of them work full time because they all have kids, and they're all going through that being 30 and married thing, So I've got these great people who can only give me so much time, but we work it out. And then I have, about 7 other people that for specific skills. So it's been a puzzle putting it together, but I feel that we've done everything correctly, except sell books.
I think in the literary world, it's a little bit different. Unless you're a big publishing house. I mean, I know you have a publishing company, but just like you said, everyone that you hire has different time management. I think a lot of times because when it's online, okay, just like for me, I am self-published, but I have an assistant who works whatever hours she can, because she's not just my assistant. She has several other authors she works for.
Okay.
So it's a matter of budgeting your time for what you need, and you know what I mean. So I fully understand. And I've had 2 assistants, but even that, getting them in the same messenger at the same time is a little difficult. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I was just looking today. In fact, before we talked, we were talking about, we've done a little advertising here and there and seen what works, seen what doesn't work, and we're talking about Amazon advertising, which is advertised as being really easy. They lied, because I'm trying to figure it out, and it is amazing, but it's also not easy. And I'm looking for someone who understands Amazon AMS advertising and Google. And I was going to do it myself because I couldn't find anybody on my staff with the time. But then I thought, I don't have the time. So you sort of, you look for things and try to figure them out.
Right.
That's all you can do.
Well,
But
we're a little bit over our time. I usually do
we
about
are
10.
okay.
Yeah. I know. You're very easy to
Yeah.
talk to, and
Oh, thank you.
I would let you go on for hours, but my camera will shut off in about 4
Okay.
minutes.
Oh, okay.
But what I want to ask a couple final questions. One basic, because I think you covered a lot of the questions. I didn't even have to ask you. You just kind of
Oh,
went with it, and
okay.
I just kind of let you go.
Okay.
That's fine.
That's a good interviewer.
Yes. Well, hey,
Yeah.
it's magic. I'm just sitting back with my fingers and I just let you go. Um, what is something you would want your listeners to take away from this interview about you?
About me?
As an
Oh,
author.
well, people say, "Are you the main character in The Brave Historian?" And the answer is yes and no. There are traces of me in there, but it's not me. And I've been very careful to use places that I've been, so I'm very accurate about that. And the
Mm-hmm.
historical fiction it's accurate in that account. But the themes, that is me. Like when I was young, it was like, oh my gosh, I I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how to do it. I just went through that for a longest time, and so that's sort of how the book just flows together. Um, and I also, people that are 100 years old aren't done. I mean,
Oh,
they were once children jumping rocks, and with all the dreams. And this particular story, I gave him a great life. Unfortunately, he didn't follow through on everything he wanted to. But
right.
the life itself is very exciting, and his dreams. People say, "Oh my gosh, you write dreams." Just there's a lot of humor in there, and there's also a lot of, I feel I want to attack the senses, make you cry, make you laugh, make you just put a lump in your throat, and that's the way I like to write. So it's a
Well,
little lyrical too.
if you write anyway, in any which way you speak, I bet it's a very elegant book.
It's
I,
very elegant, and hopefully there's no typos, because I
well,
actually had two different. I have no. I don't think there are any typos. We've gone over it real
we
close.
always think positive on that.
Oh well, yeah,
I want
yeah.
to thank you so much for being on the
Oh,
show, Robert.
no, no,
It was a great pleasure to have you on. You are a
thank you,
fabulous speaker, and we should definitely have you on again.
thank you
Thank
so much. I really
You're
enjoyed it.
welcome. You're
Okay,
welcome. Thank you, our
okay.
audience. Look forward to coming back to the show next Thursday as our next show. Thank you again, everyone. Have a great evening. Bye bye for now.
Thanks, Eric.
You're
Bye.
welcome.